Opening the debate at that time, the then Minister of Justice, Senator the Honorable Mark Golin, as he was at that time, offered words that are worth repeating today. He said Jamaicans want a solution that will stand the test of time. Right? Our debt must be brought down to sustainable levels. But this insurance policy that we're discussing here today, I think, is what has compelled successive governments to stay on a path of discipline. Right? It was not choice, it was legislative. Right?
Blessings, ABR family and viewers. Welcome back to the channel. It's your girl, Isabel Rose. And in this one, a newly minted opposition senator schools them on what the fiscal rule is really about. Because we see in the labor rights them jumping up and down, talking about, yes, they have received or they have acquired the biggest, loan in the history of Jamaica, which is rightly so. But then there's a twist to it where only 3 point something, billion US dollars are secured. And who better to give us more info on that? And basically tell them about this fiscal rule that they have basically stated that they will, abort for the time being. They're not going to stick to any fiscal rules right now. And him touch on some very important aspects, stating that how are they going to manage such a big or a hefty package when every single year for about 2 years ago they are unable to fully spend the capital budget with a finance minister as Favour Williams. All she does is come to our parliament to boast and gloat, and seems as if she's throwing words just like her boss, but not basically giving us full details, full clarity, so the Jamaican people can fully understand. But Ramon, small Ferguson, will school them on all of this. Stay tuned for the details at hand. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel.
Before we can responsibly debate the suspension of any aspect of our fiscal rules, which is what we're here to discuss, it's not routine, as was implied earlier, we have to first, I think, be reminded about why the fiscal rules exist in the first place, right? They're not technical ornaments. They're legal guardrails that protect our country's finances from political convenience, right? They ensure that discipline is not left to the goodwill of any administration, right? But it's required by law on behalf of the people of Jamaica. And the truth is that when any country's finances are unstable, it's not the financial markets that suffer first. It's the people. Right? It's the people who have to wait for their schools to be upgraded. It's the people who have to wait for their hospitals to be at a basic level of acceptability. It's the people who have to drive on roads that remain unrepaired. Our citizens are the ones who feel the strain of daily life when the finances of the country are unstable. Therefore, fiscal rules are not established to restrain ambition, but they're established to protect opportunities for our workers and our families and our communities. Right? So Jamaica didn't arrive at the fiscal stability that we claim by accident. It came out of the legislative work that underlines the discussion that we're having here, and it came during a very difficult period in our history. It was when our debt burden was at its worst, and when we are in the wake of a failed engagement with the IMF, right? It was during the 2011 to 2016 period under the administration of the Most Honorable Portia Simpson Miller, that the architecture of our fiscal rules was largely designed and negotiated and enacted. In fact, on March 21st, 2014, the Senate passed the legislation that embedded these rules into two core statutes, the Public Bodies Management and Accountability Act and the Financial Administration and Audit Act. In opening the debate at that time, the then Minister of Justice, Senator the Honorable Mark Golin, as he was at that time, offered words that are worth repeating today. He said Jamaicans want a solution that will stand the test of time. Right? Our debt must be brought down to sustainable levels and must put in place arrangements to ensure that we don't allow ourselves to get back into that situation again. If the country takes this stand for permanent sound fiscal management, we're purchasing a solid insurance policy for our nation's future. Now, there's been a lot said about insurance policies recently, but this insurance policy that we're discussing here today, I think, is what has compelled successive governments to stay on a path of discipline. Right? It was not choice, it was legislative. Right? There are a number of reasons, right, why this is of critical importance, right? And this particular matter is one of the main reasons why when Jamaica entered into recent global shocks like the pandemic and now the unfortunate occurrence of Hurricane Melissa, we have been in a stronger position. Right? It's precisely because the fiscal rule worked why we can today contemplate a suspension of the rule in response to a national emergency. But any decision to activate the escape clause must be guided by some seriousness, the same seriousness that went into putting the rule in place to begin with. Any escape must be temporary, it must be transparent, and it must be firmly tethered in the goal of protecting our people, which is what brought us to the fiscal rule in the first place. Because without that, we're going to be sacrificing the tomorrow of the people of Jamaica. A lot has been said about the 6.7 billion, right? And I won't rehash what it's about, except to say that it's important that the country deserves clarity on what the $6.7 billion actually represents. Now, my understanding from what has been shared publicly is that only $3.6 billion of this package is new and secured thus far. There's $662 million, which we always knew existed, in liquidity from the disaster insurance proceeds and the contingent credit access and the domestic resources. But the remainder of $2.4 billion, follow me now, right, is not financing that has been secured or committed, but rather it's private capital that will need to be mobilized, and it's contingent on Jamaica's ability to present bankable and competitive projects. Right? So we've secured the debt, but we effectively will have to compete for the rest, right? And Mr. President, I don't want you to misunderstand me, right? While that is a source of optimism, even if it is counted in the total sum, there is still a shortfall relative to all the estimates that I've seen with respect to actual damage. And then when we contemplate the concept of rebuilding or replacing better, that could prospectively cause an increase even relative to that damage. And then when we think about the output that's been lost during this period, there is a deficit with respect to what the country will need to build back better. Right? So, in other words, while this international support that has been touted is welcome, one, only a portion of it is secure and guaranteed, and there is a substantial amount left to be filled, right? So I have a couple of questions associated with this. The first is, what has been contemplated thus far refilling the gap, the clear gap that exists between the funding identified and the funding needed, right? The second question is, with respect to the sum that we will need to compete for, we will need to present projects for, where are those projects? Now, I've heard that there are a list of national projects and the intention is to draw from that portfolio of projects. But again, my understanding from the limited information that has been shared is that this funding will be targeted specifically towards recovery projects, right? And you know, the challenge that I have, Mr. President, is surrounding two things. One is, what's the basis of eligibility under the financing framework? How are we going to transparently prioritize the projects to be pursued in relation to this money? Okay? How are we going to ensure that the essential recovery projects, not any pre-existing initiatives that are unrelated, are focused with respect to this funding opportunity? The third question is, what's the plan that the government has to present bankable projects at the required scale to actually access this money? And the reason I ask is that we have had a challenge as a country credibly accessing foreign direct investments over the last decade or so, right? And now we are being asked to mobilize a significant amount of external financing through this 2.4 billion, private sector-led financing in effect, at a scale that we've never been able to successfully do it before. This is in the context as well, Mr. President, of the government having repeatedly underspent its own capital budget. For the last 2 consecutive years, the state has struggled to mobilize domestic development spending that was already appropriated. So if we're not able to execute on our own capital projects, using our own money, right? If we haven't been able to sort that out, how are we going to execute with international projects, financing structures that require much more complexity and delivery? My concern, Mr. President, is that this 2.4 billion becomes a concept, it becomes a white elephant. It's available in theory, but inaccessible in practice.
So this loan here, where them a brag and a boast about, I hope when they get a better understanding that they're going to have to stick to whole heap of rules from these lenders. Right? So, and our easy task this is a uphill battle. Uphill task. So, let us see if them have the head can spend this year money, because if them can spend a capital budget in our country, how them are going to spend this year money? And hence the reason why they're telling us that them not touch none of the aid money all now. They're still figuring out after 5 weeks how to spend it. Them now have the head for spend it, Jamaican people. But more to come, and we are going to watch a ride. What says you, ABR family and viewers? Leave a like on the video, share out the video. Please subscribe to the channel if you're new on the road to 50K. Help me to get there by playing your part. Please stay tuned for more videos, stay tuned for more updates. Big up on yourself. Happy Saturday.